There's a strange kind of tiredness that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from carrying something for too long, without realizing you were never supposed to hold it alone. People often describe it as burnout, lack of motivation, emotional numbness, or just feeling off. But those words never fully explain what's happening underneath, because for many people, the exhaustion didn't start in adulthood. It started quietly years earlier, before language, before awareness, before memory formed the way we understand it now. It started when the nervous system learned something too early. Some children don't lose their childhood suddenly. There's no single event, no dramatic moment. They simply stop being held, emotionally, psychologically, sometimes physically. They learn very young that distress doesn't reliably bring comfort, that asking doesn't always result in care, that being quiet, capable, or helpful makes life smoother, so they adapt. And from the outside, that adaptation looks impressive. They're mature for their age, responsible, independent, self-controlled. Adults praise them without realizing what that praise is reinforcing. But internally, something very specific is happening. The child's nervous system begins shifting from connection-based regulation to self-regulation. This matters because the human brain is not designed to regulate itself in isolation early in life. In healthy development, a child's emotional system is regulated externally first. A caregiver soothes distress, mirrors emotion, provides safety. Over time, the child internalizes that regulation. But when that process is skipped or rushed, the brain compensates. The child doesn't stop needing regulation. They just perform it alone. This is where growing up too fast actually begins. Not with responsibility, but with emotional self-containment. Neuroscientifically, this changes how stress systems develop. The amygdala becomes more vigilant. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis becomes more reactive. The prefrontal cortex matures early in some ways and underdevelops in others. The child learns to monitor the environment constantly. They scan for tension. They anticipate needs. They prevent problems instead of responding to them. This is not anxiety. It's adaptation. But adaptation has a cost. Because when the brain learns early that safety comes from control, effort becomes survival-based, and survival effort does not feel rewarding. Think about a child who notices their parents' mood, determines the atmosphere of the house. They learn to stay quiet when the parent is stressed. They learn to be helpful before being asked. They learn to suppress their own needs because expressing them feels risky. Over time, the brain links effort with preventing harm, not creating joy. This pattern doesn't disappear in adulthood. It transforms. The adult becomes capable, reliable, high-functioning, but effort never feels satisfying. Achievement doesn't create relief. Success doesn't create rest, because the nervous system never learned that effort leads to care. Only that effort prevents consequences. This is one of the most misunderstood foundations of adult exhaustion. People think they're tired because they work too much, but many are tired because their nervous system has never experienced effort, followed by safety. Only effort followed by more effort. The brain tracks this pattern. It always does. Motivation is not a desire problem. It's a prediction problem. Before you start something, your brain predicts the outcome, not consciously, neurally. Dopamine rises not when you enjoy something, but when your brain believes the action will matter. If your history taught your brain that effort leads to neutral outcomes, Dopamine stops rising. Motivation fades. This is why people say things like, "I know what I need to do, but I just can't start." They're not blocked mentally, they're underfunded neurologically. The system that initiates action is being conserved, because the brain has learned that action doesn't resolve pressure. Another real-life example looks like this. A child grows up in a home where emotional needs are minimized. They're told they're too sensitive. They're encouraged to be strong. They're praised for not crying. So they learn to disconnect from emotional signals. They become logical, composed, self-reliant. But emotions don't disappear. They go underground. The nervous system still processes them, but without expression or relief. This creates a baseline tension state. Later in life, this person struggles to feel excited, not because they're depressed, but because excitement requires vulnerability, and vulnerability was once unsafe. So the nervous system dampens emotional peaks. This isn't a conscious choice. It's protective regulation. The brain reduces emotional contrast to avoid disappointment. This is why some people reach major milestones and feel nothing. Graduation, promotion, marriage, achievement. They expected something to shift, but nothing does. Because the nervous system learned not to register reward strongly. Reward once led to loss, pressure, or expectation. So the brain learned to stay neutral. Neutral feels safer. Now consider how this affects motivation. Motivation requires emotional contrast. If reward doesn't register, effort feels pointless. So the system withdraws drive. Another pattern shows up in people who were parentified early. They took on emotional responsibility for siblings or parents. They became the stabilizer, the listener, the problem solver. This teaches the brain that others' needs come first, and that your role is to emotional weight. In adulthood, this creates a strange dynamic. You're good at helping others, but when it comes to your own goals, energy collapses. Why? Because effort directed toward yourself feels unfamiliar, sometimes even unsafe. The nervous system doesn't associate self-directed ambition with belonging. It associates it with abandonment or guilt. So motivation for personal growth weakens, not because you lack ambition, but because ambition was never allowed to be self-serving. The brain remembers. Another mechanism that develops in early emotional independence is hypervigilance. The child learns to anticipate problems. They become sensitive to subtle cues, tone changes, facial expressions, environmental shifts. This constant monitoring consumes energy. Even when nothing is wrong, the nervous system stays partially activated. Over years, this leads to chronic stress without obvious anxiety. People say they're calm, but their body disagrees. Muscles stay tight, breathing stays shallow, sleep is light. The brain interprets this as low-grade threat, and under threat, long-term ambition shuts down. The brain prioritizes survival over expansion. This is why people can be intelligent, capable, and insightful, and still feel stuck. The system responsible for growth is being inhibited, not by fear, by unresolved stress patterns. And here's the key insight. The brain does not differentiate between past and present threat if the body pattern is the same. If your body learned early that effort equals tension, adulthood doesn't erase that. The pattern persists until the signal changes. This is why pushing harder often makes things worse. Effort applied on top of a nervous system that already associates effort with pressure reinforces the problem. The brain hears more demand, so it pulls back further. This creates the cycle many people live in. They feel behind, so they push, so they burn out, so they feel ashamed. Shame increases stress. Stress reduces motivation. And the cycle continues. What's missing from most conversations is this. Motivation returns when the nervous system experiences effort, followed by safety, not reward. Safety. That means completion without new demand, expression without consequence, rest without guilt. For people who grew up too fast, these experiences feel unfamiliar, sometimes uncomfortable, because calm feels empty when you're used to tension. Stillness can feel like loss, so the nervous system resists it. This is why some people stay busy even when exhausted. Movement feels safer than rest, effort feels safer than silence. But long-term, this drains the system. Eventually, the brain forces a slowdown, not through panic, through numbness. This is where people say, I just don't care anymore. But they do care. Their system is protecting them from caring too much without support. One of the most important shifts happens when people realize this isn't a flaw, it's a learned survival strategy. Your brain didn't malfunction. It adapted brilliantly to your environment, but environments change, and adaptations that once kept you safe can later keep you stuck. The work is not to become more disciplined, it's to retrain prediction, to show the nervous system that effort can lead to closure, that expression can lead to understanding, that rest does not lead to loss. This is slow, because the brain trusts experience, not insight. But when these new patterns repeat, motivation begins to return, not explosively, quietly, as permission. You start wanting things again, not urgently, but steadily. You begin initiating without force. You stop needing pressure to move. This is not because you fixed your personality. It's because your nervous system finally believes it's safe to invest energy forward. Growing up too fast didn't make you broken. It made you strong early. But strength developed without softness always costs something. And the healing is not about going backward. It's about allowing yourself finally to grow at the pace you never got to choose. And when the brain learns that effort can exist without threat, motivation doesn't need to be chased. It returns on its own, slow, stable, and real.